It looks like Squat EXO ARMOUR is back in force. Let's talk about some Einhyr Hearthguard, the Leagues of Votann equivalent of Terminators. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking Votann once more, and Games Workshop do seem to have been keeping up the stream of new releases, with plenty of Leagues of Votann models being shown off in these Monday previews of theirs. Today we've got one of the units that I think a lot of people were interested in, and in particular it's one of the more famous squat units from the distant past. I think people would have been very surprised if the Leagues of Votann had come back and they hadn't had some equivalent of EXO armor. It is basically the Space Dwarf equivalent of Terminator armor, massive great big bulky armor that you need extra servos and motors to allow you to move in it, and I can't help but think that these things are going to be enormously tanky in game. In terms of what we know about them so far, Games Workshop's preview was kind of fairly short and sweet. They're called the Einhyr Hearthguard. They've shown off 5 different models for them, so there's probably going to be 5 in the kit. And they're basically the elite of the Votann fighting force, selected on merits to wear this servo-assisted exo armor, inch-thick battle plating that can laugh off the vast majority of light enemy fire. In the army, it doesn't sound like there's anything particularly weird going on with them. They do seem to fill the same role as Terminators, as you might expect, bodyguards for important characters, or first strike shock assault troops. Heavily armoured things like Terminators tend to favour close quarters engagement, things like boarding spaceships where their massive durability allows them to push through heavy enemy fire. The models themselves do seem to share a few similarities with Terminators, a little bit more of the rounded interlocking plates that a lot of the other Votann armour has had so far, but there do seem to be a lot of similarities there. They've got a great big gauntlet that looks like a power fist with a plasma blade coming out the back of it, a nice energy weapon in their other arm, and some rather enormous chunky shoulder pauldrons with some raised areas, maybe making them feel a little bit more practical and utilitarian as opposed to the more heraldic displays of the Space Marines perhaps. To be fair though, it's not like they don't have a bit of bling going on. They've got a fair bit of gold engravings in the front of the armour there. I've no doubt that these suits will be crafted by their finest battlesmiths. I must admit perhaps the thing that I'm least certain of about the kit is their non-helmeted head. It does just look a little bit incongruous compared with the rest of the model, being a lot less protected, and also just having a dwarf just peeking over the head there. My suspicion is that they'll probably have an option where you can just fill them all with enclosed helmets. My guess is that you'll probably be able to have an option to swap out the head with the sort of domed canopy type thing that the troops have. It's kind of a shame that they haven't shown any of those off, if that is indeed an option. It does also seem a bit weird to have all that massive armour and then just have your head completely exposed as well. I don't know if they're saying that they've got force shields and things going on a bit like Terminators do. Maybe in theory they're not quite as exposed as they might look. Taking a look through the other models in the squad next, most of them besides the Thane seem to be armed with the same gear, as well as the look of the Power Fist with the plasma blade on the back of it. They also have the Vulcanite weapon, and they have a back-mounted grenade launcher, one that at least does feel kind of similar to the Astra Militarum one, or maybe sort of like a heavier back-mounted version of the Alarus Custodians. They're all angled slightly upwards as well. I do kind of wonder whether they might be similar to the Tau airbursting fragmentation projector, might be a close-range barrage weapon perhaps. In general, the models don't seem to be massively different aside from the various different heads, though again I can't say that they're my absolute favourite part of the model. Next up we've got another two, one with that enclosed domed helmet thing. He appears to be peeking out of his helmet there, and my guess would be that there'll be the option to fill them with that visor closed, which I think would actually look really quite menacing and pretty cool. I think perhaps the best looking out of all of these 5 models they've shown off is this guy on the right. He looks like he's got a lot of character there, and he does look like he's clearly doing something, aiming and firing his gun as well. I think out of all the non-helmeted heads, he probably looks the best. Finally, we have the unit's leader. I'm going to guess, again, this is going to be the Thane, and they do have that similar sort of heraldry thing jutting over their heads like the troops unit did. Rather than the plasma blade, they seem to have picked up a great big concussion hammer, I think. Quite nice that the Thane looks like they'll be able to take even heavier combat gear. I must admit I've always found it a tiny bit disappointing that standard Terminators you usually have to take a power sword on the Sergeant, so the most fighty model will be hitting with a slightly weaker weapon against most targets. Really quite cool looking armour I think. I quite like the metallic spinal column in the centre, and I've got a bunch of hydraulic looking bits on the back as well. Sort of reminds me a little bit of the Space Marine Centurions. Maybe makes a bit more sense for the Votann though, as they're quite small and kind of need the extra suits to make them bigger and beefier in stature. Weapons wise, they're shown off a few things. There might also be other bits in the kit. Apparently for the melee weapon, you're going to have the option between power fists of some sort or plasma blades. I'm going to guess by the fist option they probably mean the concussion gauntlets. They do talk in the article about having technology that increases the mass of the punch. I guess in a similar vein, that hammer that the Thane has is probably going to be a concussion hammer or mallet of some sort. I'd not be too surprised to see something similar to Thunderhammer type rules there. Otherwise, for ranged weapons, those guns are apparently Vulcanite disintegrators. Maybe might have some sort of special rules similar to Volkite weapons with mortal wounds on 6s in 40k. There's probably at least a chance they might have some sort of special heavier type weapon that the squad can carry, a bit like the Terminators, the way that they can take assault cannons or heavy flamers. In game, I feel that these guys are quite likely to have similar kind of stats to Space Marine Terminators, perhaps. I don't know whether they'll have 2 wounds or 3 wounds. They are significantly beefier than the standard Votann. Either way, I strongly suspect we might be looking at a 2+ save for them. As we've been shown off 5 models here, that's almost certainly going to be the number that comes in the box, so that would usually translate into a datasheet having somewhere between 5 and 10 models in the squad if you want to. As what looks like some of the standard elites for the army, they're probably going to have core, and probably going to be one of the units that you can put lots of character buffs on and make them excessively durable or dangerous. Finally, as if there weren't already enough equivalents to Terminators for these guys, we have actually already seen a stratagem for them, Might of the Einhyr, which at the time I did think sounded exactly like Fury of the First, and that does appear to be right. The flavor text talks about the Kindred elites truly showing their quality, and it's 1 command point for a +1 to hit when these guys either shoot or fight. It's a pretty handy one for Space Marine Terminators, really quite nice to give them that extra boost to overcome a difficult foe if they really need it in combat. Certainly no bad thing to have on these guys. Obviously no idea as to whether or not they'll be good or interesting compared with the rest of the army rules-wise yet, but 9th edition does seem to have quite a lot of emphasis on really big elite infantry squads with solid buffs. I think that these guys are certainly going to be a unit to watch. So anyway, let me know what you think of the models down in the comments below. Do you think that they look good? And are you with me in hoping that they might have a helmeted version, perhaps to make them look a bit more anonymous and imposing? I feel like they might be the sort of model that a lot of people really like, and a lot of people are a bit less convinced about. In any case, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly be covering any other news that Games Workshop comes out with for the Leagues of Votann, and look forward to reviewing their new models and their codex once it's out. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on Auspex Tactics, I would just like to mention that I do have a Patreon page down in the video description below. The Patreon is what allows me to keep these videos coming quite so regularly, so if you are enjoying a lot, any support is enormously appreciated. It is what allows me to make so many. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.